Hi, Stories Channel here.
And today we're covering a 2013 British horror movie named Bloody Homecoming. The movie starts with a scene with a group of freshmen attending a homecoming dance. On their way to school, some senior year students pull a prank on them and refuse to let them enter. They dictate to the fresh students that they are not welcome here. Bummed out, the group moves to a courtyard. They decide to call it a night when a guy named Billy tells them to stay. He surprises them with a booze and informs them he has a backup plan. The group then heads over to a nearby building to drink and have a good time. In order to impress his girlfriend named Annie, Billy moves into a room with her. To lighten up the mood, Billy lights a candle and opens up a drink. The couple is celebrating their 1-month anniversary. Billy is being romantic with Annie, but she tells him that she's not ready yet. They start having an argument and being annoyed, Billy forces himself on her. Meanwhile, Annie's best friend named Lauren comes from behind and hits Billy in the head. She then locks him inside the room. Afterwards, Lauren tells the party what Billy did to Annie and all of them move back to the courtyard. Angry at what Billy had done, the group wants to leave him inside as revenge for trying to assault Annie. In the interim, Billy finds himself locked in a room. He starts banging the door and shouts for help. As he attempts to get out, he knocks over a candle and sets the room at fire. On the other hand, the school's principal named Patterson approaches the group with his associates. They inform him that senior year students aren't letting them into the dance party. Suddenly, a boy named Mathis sees fumes coming out of the building. The smoke rages out of control, and as they open the door, they see Billy lying dead, smoldering at their feet. 3 years later, after being healed from Billy's death tragedy, Winston High School is finally hosting a homecoming dance for the students. At the school, we see everyone excited and happy, including the principal and staff. In the next scene, Lauren and her boyfriend named Steve approach their friends named Nora and Robbie, who are smoking outside. They ask them about Annie. All of them are a little concerned about her as she hasn't been attending her classes for a few days. Robbie oddly jokes about Nora's mental health and Lauren leaves. Steve goes after her. The couple then decides to meet Annie on their way home. Later, Robbie and Nora are having fun in a storage room when a janitor named Fred runs into them. Next, we see Steve and Lauren visiting Annie's house. They start knocking the door, but Annie doesn't respond and the couple decides to leave. Upon returning back to the kitchen, Annie suspects something is off and goes towards the bedroom. All of a sudden, a person dressed as a fireman comes from behind and attacks her. As she is trying to escape, the killer follows her and kills her with a sharpened baton. The next morning, Lauren and her friends gather in a changing room and inquire about Annie. None of them knows what happened to her. The girls then move towards the locker room. As they open their lockers, they see a cryptic note inside it. Afterwards, the whole group goes to Principal Patterson to complain about the threat. He tells them that it can be a prank and they shouldn't take it seriously. He then asks the group if they think of someone who might have a reason to do this, but no one has any clue. Subsequently, he thinks that since Annie is not coming, she might be the prankster. They then head over to the lockers. Principal Patterson opens her locker and there's no note for her in it. So, he advises everyone to calm down and prepare for the homecoming. The group then decides to visit her after school. Then, we see Lauren, Steve and their friend, named Jacqueline, are attending a lecture. Jacqueline points out towards her class fellow named Mathis, suggesting that he might be the one who is putting those letters in their lockers. Meanwhile, their instructor Mrs. Patterson cuts her off and asks her to present her thoughts on what she was teaching. Instead, Lauren comes to rescue her and explains to Mrs. Patterson what she thinks about the text. Then, we see a cheerleader named Cassie, rehearsing with her friends when Patterson summons her. He wants her to come by her office to discuss the crowning of this year's homecoming queen. She is excited after hearing that she's nominated. Mr. Patterson insists her to come with him to his office, however, she refuses as she has plans with her friends. Cassie then runs over to his friend, named Wade, and tells him how Mr. Patterson just flirted with her. Afterwards, the group gathers after school as planned and leaves for Annie's house. Meanwhile, at the principal's office, Billy's father is waiting for Patterson. He inquires about the scary notes that the kids are receiving. They start to have an argument as the officer wants Patterson to expel the kids who took Billy's life. Whereas, the principal is telling him that he can't do anything as it was an accident. Sheriff leaves the office and advises him to do his job properly. Later, Mrs. Patterson enters into his office and tells her husband to relax. Then, we see the group arriving at Annie's house. The front door is closed, so they move inside the house through the back door. As everyone spreads out, Lauren receives a message from Annie's cell phone that she wants everyone to leave her alone. The group doesn't know that she's already been murdered. So, the group decides to give her some space, and leaves the house. On their way back, Wade notifies everyone to come 2 hours before the homecoming dance. Up next, in a parking lot, Jacqueline is waiting for her boyfriend, named Carl, who is a deputy officer. She calls him to meet her as she is scared. Unfortunately, he can't because he's on duty. So, he tells her to stay put and wait for her friends. Meanwhile, Steve and Lauren arrive at the parking area and see Jacqueline crying. Lauren comforts her and takes her inside. On the other hand, Nora and Robbie are fooling around in the parking lot when Robbie gets killed by the same person who murdered Annie. Nora screams in terror and escapes to hide from the killer. As she is taking cover of a jeep, the masked person appears from behind and stabs her in the eye. Up next, we see the surviving group members drinking to their friendships in the teacher's lounge. Everyone simmers down to the music in the concert hall. Mr. Patterson weirdly stares at Cassie while she is dancing. In the interim, Mrs. Patterson comes and summons Cassie and Wade backstage. In the following scene, Mr. Patterson comes to the stage and welcomes the students to the homecoming. Wade then crowns Mathis as homecoming king and Cassie as the queen. While being joyful, Cassie hugs Wade and calls for a celebration. Wade tells her to wait and goes to fetch some drinks. Back at the teacher's lounge, Wade is texting when the killer stands behind him and pops a balloon. As he turns over, the charlatan attempts to hit him with the baton but he misses it. As a reaction, Wade tries to fight the villain but the freak chokes him to death and moves the body out of the room. Then, we see Cassie wandering in the corridors looking for Wade when she spots a person dragging Wade's body. The murderer sees her and rushes over to her. She starts running and comes across the janitor. She asks Fred for help and tells him that someone is trying to kill her. Suddenly, the masked person stabs Fred and hurts him really badly. Cassie screams while seeing this and runs over to the library to hide. As the killer is trying to grab her, Cassie dashes into another room and attempts to escape towards the concert hall. As she enters the hall, the killer grasps her and slits her throat. Meanwhile, the rest of the group gets worried as Nora and Robbie have disappeared and now Cassie and Wade aren't coming back as well, so they decide to look for them. In the interim, Carl is patrolling in the high school. As he is looking through the window, he sees the reflection of the murderer. He tries to attack the perp but gets killed right away. On their way to the teacher's lounge, the group discovers a torch on the floor. Steve picks it up and they see blood on the floor. Jacqueline gets nauseous and runs towards the bathroom. Lauren then tells her not to go in there by herself so she follows Jacqueline to the restroom. In the lavatory, Jacqueline starts screaming while seeing the decapitated head of Cassie. The killer appears from behind and tries to kill her. However, Steve comes to rescue her and strikes the thug. The freak pushes him over. Steve and Lauren then try to escape as the killer chases them while Jacqueline is lying unconsciously on the floor. Afterwards, they reach the locker room. Steve tells his girlfriend to be quiet and stay alert. He then moves ahead to get some help when he encounters the killer. As the freak is following him, he goes into the sports center and hides behind the bleachers. The thug then pushes the seats against Steve and squeezes him to death. On the other hand, while dancing, a boy falls on the floor and discovers a pool of blood. Everyone starts screaming and the coach informs everyone to get out of here. Meanwhile, Lauren is waiting for Steve when the killer returns back to the locker room. As she is hiding in fear, the imposter knocks her unconscious and drags her body out. Later, we see Jacqueline wake up and get in her senses. While limping, she moves out of the bathroom looking for her friends when she finds out her boyfriend is dead. Up next, we see Lauren being tied to a chair with her dead friends around her. Surprisingly, Mr. Patterson is also amongst them. The murderer enters the room carrying a fuel tank. The thug then removes the mask and the identity of the maniac is revealed. Lauren gets shocked seeing Mrs. Patterson as the killer. She begs Mrs. Patterson to let her go and asks her why she's doing this. Mrs. Patterson exclaims at how the group has taken away Billy from her and wants revenge for her love. Mrs. Patterson then blames her husband for being unfaithful, and states that he's finally going to get what he deserves. Mrs. Patterson thinks Lauren is responsible for Billy's death. Begging for her life, Lauren says that Billy was trying to assault Annie, that's why she locked him up in the room. Mrs. Patterson slaps Lauren and tells her to keep her mouth shut. As she's about to set everyone on fire, Jacqueline comes from behind and smashes her with the torch. Mrs. Patterson then hits Jacqueline and tries to kill her when Lauren strangles her with a rope. She in return attempts to stab Lauren but she dodges and the baton goes through her husband's chest. Afterwards, Jacqueline kicks Mrs. Patterson and she falls onto her husband. She dies instantly as the spear passes through her heart. Afterwards, we see Lauren and Jacqueline are going to their graduation party. In the parking lot, Jacqueline tries to persuade Lauren to mention the names of their friends they had lost in the speech. The pair comes out of the car and goes inside. The movie ends with another person holding a baton in his hand following them. Thanks for watching, guys.